What a chapter start! Shigaraki literally destroyed the opening title. If that is not in the opening song for an episode of My Hero Academia, like when this is finally animated, I want to be very disappointed, because it would make so much sense for Studio Bones to make an opening song, like fully make a hero version of the opening song, and then when this part of the, anime, or the anime gets to this part of the manga, it's finally animated, I would love it if the opening just shifts over to, like, a villain opening or whatever, and you just see Shigaraki just destroy the opening title, and it's called My Villain Academia. That would be so amazing if they did that. I don't know if Studio Bones would be willing to go that far. There are no David Productions, I would say, that are willing to go that far for opening songs and just really mess with it, because if there's one thing that I've always loved about JoJo, is that those opening songs, the way they can shift and change and they go with the actual plot, I've always loved that. And this is a perfect opportunity for Studio Bones to really set something up with an opening song, or at least an ending song, with just seeing the entire title crush and just get destroyed and turn to dust. That would be amazing. So please, Studio Bones, if you get this, when you finally get to this scene in the anime, please do that. I mean, you would be missing out on some crazy stuff if you do not do something like that. But okay, this chapter is from the perspective of the League of Villains. Now, I think by now everybody knows that I love these type of chapters. I love chapters that really just change our POV from the heroes over to the underdogs, or aka the villains. It's a fascinating read. It's always been fascinating for me in literature, because it's nice to see the villain's perspective on things and why they do certain things the way they do, instead of always just seeing from the perspective of the hero. And as we know, My Hero Academia is technically the POV, or the story told from Izuku. He's narrating the story. It's been clarified since the very beginning. However, this chapter is kind of like outside of Izuku's narration, because for the chapter to start off with narration, it's basically saying that this is stuff that Izuku was not aware of, at the very least, when he was narrating. He was never aware of this part of the story, and found out the reasoning to why maybe Shigaraki was as strong as he was, or why he did certain things the way he did later on at the end of the series. So this narration, starting off like it is, basically Horikoshi Sensei himself letting us know that this is stuff that is telling us that this is not technically attached to Izuku's narration whatsoever, which is kind of a no-brainer, but it's still nice little details to imply that. And Spinner telling the entire story is something I didn't really not expect at all. I didn't think Spinner would actually get to narrate this chapter, which really opens the door up for his character and allowing us to really see who he is and give him much needed development. Because Spinner, out of all the characters from the League of Villains, I say he's the one that's lacking the most, besides Dabi. Dabi is definitely a character that's lacking a little bit, but there's just so much mystery built up behind him with his potential connection to Todoroki and Endeavor that honestly, at this time, it's not really that needed that much. However, Spinner as a character, he's just someone that has been lacking. I mean, we've seen development with, Toga, we've seen development with Twice, we've seen development with, Mr. Compress, we've seen development with, Shigaraki, so I mean, we've had these characters go through some development, and so Spinner is technically the last character to really have any development, because when you think about what his character stands for, at the very least, what he was introduced as, he was a Stain clone. He was someone that was a Stain fanboy that joined the League of Villains because he believed in Stain's ideology, and that is the whole reason. And I mean, when you really think about majority of the villains that did join the League of Villains, was thanks to Stain's ideology. I mean, look, Twice and Toga and also Dabi joined, and then Spinner as well, thanks to Stain's ideology. They followed Stain's ideals, and that is why they joined. And that's when Shigaraki realized he had to take Stain's ideal to be able to build the League of Villains. And so, that is why he looks like a group of just villains instead of villains that are just doing heinous things for the sake of being heinous. And that's the difference that separates Shigaraki's group from a typical band of villains, like for instance Overhaul's group in the last major arc, which I'll get into in a second. But Spinner, like I said, he's just someone that hasn't gotten a lot of development. And I'm glad this chapter kind of dives into his character, allowing us to know why he's done certain things the way he's done. For instance, why he even decided to join the League of Villains but also why he had some weird interactions with the certain heroes in the villain invasion arc. For instance, when the Pussycats actually were fighting back against the League of Villains, or mainly Spinner, Spinner was completely outsmarted in a way. You had it to where one of the characters was like, oh, you're very pretty and all that, and you saw how Spinner blushed and got really happy, but then she lied to him and took him down, and then he called her a harlot. In that moment, the way he said that was something that you would not normally see in this day and era. Like, a line from that, like, from his character, or just in, this world, you wouldn't hear someone using that type of language. And so, this fits perfectly in with his backstory now. Now we know why he used words like that, like a country bumpkin, or an old-fashioned word, is because he's from an area, or a village, or, living area, to where it was kind of like in a countryside. It was somewhere that was in a backwater countryside that just was stuck in old times. That's pretty much what it was. And so him using this old dialect like he does makes perfect sense. It completely fits in with his character, what's already kind of been established, and clarifies certain interactions he's already had with some heroes. Well, it doesn't just stop there. His character being like it is, for instance, someone that was like his design. He's like a lizard boy, and he was kind of always called like a lizard freak. That's what it said in the Viz Media translation. He was a lizard freak, people called him that, and he lived with it. He's like, you know what, it sucks, I didn't like it, but he's just like, it just is how it is. And he felt like an empty shell, like there wasn't really any motive, like there really wasn't anything for him in his life. And then eventually he saw Stain's, final moments on TV, and he's like, he persuaded me to step up and try to change society as it was. Basically, Stain inspired, Spinner to be like, hey, you need to get up and be able to make the change, because the world's not going to change without you trying to do something about it. So Spinner got the motive, the initiative, to be able to change society, and so that is why he joined. It wasn't just to be a Stain clone through and through with his, ideology. It was just that he wanted to be able to change the world. So now we got clarification to why Spinner is here. It's not just following Stain, it's just he wants to fundamentally change the world. He wants to change it to where it's not like it is right now, and it will be different going forward for the rest of many generations until it's finally changed once again. So that's good clarification. Now, getting a little bit further into it, he mentions and talks about this group, these individuals that is against certain quirk users, people that don't really look human. Now, I can't really say certain names that they're referenced to. Like, it's obvious that Horikoshi Sensei, when he created this group that hates these type of, quirk users, it's obvious that, he was referencing a certain group in USA. I'm not going to name drop them, because YouTube probably wouldn't like that if I name drop them. So I'm not even going to play with that. I'm not going to even touch that at all. But the point is, it's obvious that we're getting some actual real-life references to certain hate groups. And I think in that moment, I was very impressed, because Horikoshi has definitely established quite a world here. I mean, we have the media playing a big role in this society. We have so much politics going on behind the scenes. We have the underground dealings with Garan, and also this new company like the CEO and all that, messing with the underground world. Then we have the whole thing of how society is now, they can't use their quirks, how the laws are and all that. There's just so much world building that's been put into this series that Horikoshi has been doing these past few arcs. And now seeing this with this group that hates, quirk users that have animal-like bodies, or bodies that don't look normally like humans, I appreciate this expansion to the world. And seeing Spinner tell the story from his perspective, like him giving narration and then describing this group, makes a lot of sense. They're basically old fossils because they're set in old ways. They're people that haven't aged well. They're people that just do not want to change. They discriminate against people that look different. And this is something that obviously would happen in this society. It makes perfect sense. I mean, when we think about the introduction of the CEO, when he's trying to sell his product, he was basically saying this. He's like, at one point in time in the past, you had it to where everybody, they can manufacture things. They can completely, mass produce, different clothing and objects, products for people, because everybody was pretty much similar. In terms of body design, you had, standard things. You would have, let's say, shirt size. You would have large, medium, and small, and it was pretty simple to be able to mass produce objects like that. But with quirks coming about and people's bodies shifting, most of the time, you can't really mass mass produce a lot of products because different products are going to work on different people, especially when you have people looking like animals and stuff, or just creatures that don't look normal at all. And that's kind of, with Horikoshi diving into that, it makes perfect sense that there would be groups that would be against that. They want to have society how it was, like, 100 plus years ago. They want people to be normal. They don't like this new change. They don't like, people looking like freaks or mutants, so to say. And this is something that you would think is probably also on the opposite side. There's probably individuals that discriminate against people that are normal. That's probably also a thing. Because, when you think about it, Izuku kind of was discriminated against. He was bullied, he had no quirk, and he was constantly just put down every so often, and it wasn't just Bakugo that was really doing this. So, it's clear that there is two sides to the same coin. You have it to where there's one group that just doesn't like the change in the new era of quirks, and when you have one group that just picks on people that don't have quirks. It's a back and forth thing, and that's kind of how real life is too. So, once again, congratulations on Horikoshi to really expanding upon the world and some of these things that really fit in with how real life is. And it would also definitely give better motive to certain things that happen in the future, because one of the big things that this arc is trying to do is set up groups that will definitely change the world. There can be certain movements that happen. For instance, the Liberation Force and all that, the Meta Liberation Force or whatever, they are an individual group that just wants to be able to have freedom, where you can use your quirk no matter what. And that is a big thing, and that they're a big part of this arc right now. And then getting this new group, these old fossils that are introduced that, are discriminating against, lizard people or whatever, it also is something that can make a lot of movement depending on how certain things are. And the League of Villains as a group, they're a group that just is like righteous villains. So yeah. Anyways, let's talk about what happened. So, seeing how they took down this group makes perfect sense, because once again, it fits in line with what Shigaraki's group is trying to be symbolized as. They are a group that's not necessarily fundamentally evil. Even though they might do bad things, they're not necessarily straight up evil. They have good motives for the why they're doing certain things. And that's the main point here, is that with them robbing and taking out this group, let's be real here, they're probably doing society a service in a way. And some people will view it like that. Like, oh, these guys shouldn't have been around in the first place. So it's kind of good that the League of Villains are taking these literal living pieces of scum out. So, yeah, it makes sense now why that happened, is that it's building up also, once again, some of the reputation of the League of Villains, because as people do hear about it, and the League of Villains name gets out on it, they're like, oh, so they're getting rid of this group, and they are not with groups that act like that, discriminating against people that have quirks that make them look like animals. Now, another thing, too, is that the League of Villains are in a very hard time right now. They don't have money, which I think is a very big, important detail that I'm glad is being addressed. Because you know how in a lot of series you have villains build up and they just randomly be able to get certain gadgets or new things like nothing? I'm glad this is not the case for this series. You see to where Shigaraki, he's struggling in his own way. His group is struggling in its own way because obviously they're vagabonds. They're outcasts of society and they can't really function in society. If they were to walk on the street, they'd be instantly noticed and arrested and put away. And so they can't just go out seeking help or get a standard job anymore. How far they've went with their life now, they can no longer get a proper job. They're fugitives. So they need to find a way to be able to make money. And seeing how this is going to be probably one of the big things that they need to confront and tackle is pretty exciting, because this opens the door up for Shigaraki getting better in the business side of things. Because look, he's already learned how to have an ideal, how to use people's ideals as stepping stones to be able to achieve his motive. He's gotten a motive, basically. Then he learned how to prepare a plan, be able to look at things, prepare a plan to be able to outsmart his opponents. And now, with this arc, it seems like what Shigaraki's going to learn is that he needs to be able to handle the business side. He needs to, if he can't handle the business side, he needs to have someone that can handle it. He needs to be able to have money flow. He needs to be able to get things, product moved, for he can be able to accomplish things he needs. Because you will not be able to change society without being able to have some form of business aspect to your organization. That's just common sense. Either you're going to have overwhelming power, or you're going to have a lot of money to be able to get things done. And usually, really good villains are going to have both. And that's kind of what All for One stood for, was that he was someone that obviously was incredibly powerful, like holy crap what he did, but also he had a lot of capital. He had a lot of money to back him, which allowed him to get as far as he did. So if it wasn't for his money, but also for his power, he would never have been as iconic as he was. And that's the thing. Shigaraki may have the quirk. He may have the influence. He may have, certain things that make him really strong and scary, but right now he doesn't have enough capital to be able to really get things going. The only thing he really had things going for him was that the League of Villains was just so much in the spotlight that people were paying attention to them and wanted their spotlight to be able to progress their plans. For instance, let's look at Overhaul. Overhaul as a character, the reason why he even decided to intermingle with the villains, the League of Villains, was because they were just so well known that if he had them on his side, he could easily get things done. Certain product moved and all that. For instance, the Quirk Eraser bullets. So that's the point here, is that right now, Shigaraki, he's been riding on his fame, but now that fame is gone. And now he needs to figure out a way to not just rely on fame, but rely on his own business skills to get things done. So, there you go. Now this opens the door up for him getting into the underworld market, and eventually maybe replacing the CEO. And I feel like that's where the story's going right now, is that Shigaraki's probably going to encounter this group. Obviously, they're coming after the League of Villains to bring them down, but I feel like before everything is said and done, he's probably going to learn about business skills and stuff, and he's going to be able to venture into the underworld and be able to sell products. For instance, maybe products for villains to empower them up and get them a lot stronger. That's definitely the case that's being built up. Now, another thing, too, is, the final segment of the chapter with Gigan. I think that's how you pronounce his name. We get to see how he's very emotional, a very emotional individual when it comes for All for One, and he's just so upset that Shigaraki's group isn't up to par. They're very, very weak. And this is the thing, though. I highly doubt Shigaraki is really struggling with Gigan in terms of being able to kill him. Like, when you look at the League of Villains' group, they are definitely a group that is definitely meant to kill people. Like, they have a bunch of quirks that are meant to just bring down their opponent like that. And I feel like the reason why it's so hard for them is because they're so used to, bringing down their opponents by kill instead of, I guess, disabling them, making it to where they cannot move. And that's probably the challenge right now that Shigaraki is trying to face, is that he can't just outright kill Gigan. He can't bring him down and eradicate him, because if he did, then he would lose the very power that All for One left for him. So that's probably why they're struggling so much, is that they can't kill him. So that puts them at a disadvantage, a huge handicap. And it's very clear that Gigan is not trying to kill them either, because if he was, they would already have been dead by now. So yeah, it's just basically a training arc at this time, and I am curious, because I've never really seen villains go through a training arc. Now that I think about it, I've never seen that. So I wonder if we're going to have more chapters like this, or if this is going to be the only chapter for this arc for a while that actually focuses on the villains. But okay, tell me your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel about Shigaraki finally about to meet the doctor, talking with him? Tell me your honest thoughts in the comments below. And with that, I love you guys. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And with that, Chibi out.